Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynic Alex, and Watch Mojo has returned once again to count down the top 10 best universal type characters in Marvel Future Fight. Coming in at number 10, we have Sentry, and a lot of people might be surprised by Sentry on this list. There certainly are better universals, of course, but for me, Sentry is like the great consistencer. Consistencer is not a word, but consistency is, and he's probably one of the most consistent universals left, especially in PvP, in a game mode that, you know, changes not very often, but when it does so in massive strides. But Sentry kind of keeps his cool. He's still super tanky, super easy to play on manual. He's still pretty decent on auto, and he just gets it done. While his damage doesn't really do much and leaves a lot to be desired for PvE, he can still kill metas to this day in PvP. Am I telling you to go out and finish the Sentry Epic Quest right now? No. Is there a possibility that we get Kang as the universal type? Absolutely. But until then, I still think Sentry is one of the most consistent universals in the game. While our number 10 pick, Sentry, is one of the most expensive characters because of the CCF cost and being gated behind an Epic Quest, our number 9, Thena, is in close competition with him for the most expensive character in the game, because as one of the leaders of the Eternals, and with the way that they've structured the Epic Quests, Thena is only unlockable once you've completed Kingo, Icarus, and Cersei, and then paid for and completed both Gilgamesh and Makkari. So she has an upwards cost of about 10,000 crystals when you consider all of the uniforms for her and for the unlocks for Gilgamesh and Makkari. But what you get when you unlock her is still one of the best universal female heroes in the game. Now, that's a very specific niche of character, but Thena is also in the rare company of being one of the only characters that has gotten a rework in Marvel Future Fight after being released. So if nothing else, she still serves as a beacon of hope for all of those players hoping to see buffs and reworks for some of their favorite heroes who got less than stellar uniform upgrades. Because back in the day, Thena had no heal on her 4th skill, and her damage was paltry, but they went ahead and changed all of that. They increased her accumulation and all that good stuff, and they really made her a force to be reckoned with. She's since been replaced by newer, stronger characters and uniforms, but she still holds the title as one of the best, and she's still one of the most fun to play because of how you can combo, I should say, and combine her different abilities, and just how gorgeous it all looks when it's coming together. And she's basically just raining down spears from above while cutting you to pieces with spears from in front. And she also has one of the coolest skills where she bounces something around and you can just run around. And it doesn't even look like anything. It's just like a golden orb bouncing around the arena, but it just looks so cool, and it feels so quintessentially Eternals that it's amazing. Also, the fact that they gave her Gilgamesh's attack from that anime is also pretty hilarious. Coming in at number 8, we have Thanos, and for him, this is tough to see him at number 8 considering he got a uniform so recently, but Thanos has long been thought of as more of a PvP threat than anything else. And with the PvP landscape now being taken over by the likes of Jean Grey, it's difficult to find space on your roster for Thanos. But I still think he deserves a list, and he deserves to be ranked on this top 10 list. But you could definitely argue that he should be 9th or 10th, given his value is primarily for PvP. But he still maintains the flexibility of having, you know, one of the most diverse casts of leaderships in the game. Like, he has a debuff attack defense leadership. If you go back, he has just straight up attack defense leaderships with no contingency on being activated, you know. And if you go back even further, it keeps changing. Like, his uniform and his attack and defense stats on his leadership have changed more times than maybe Captain America has changed uniforms. Probably not that many times, but it's still quite a bit. And while he may not be as strong as he once was for PvP, he's still just, you know, a small upgrade away from going right back into the meta with his massive base stats and his, you know, just plethora of abilities on his kit with Ignore Iframe, you know, a lot of fracture and incapacitation where he just removes all your buffs, frenzy, and the fact that he now has the Black Order coming in and attacking for him just looks really cool from a thematic aesthetic point of view. But it also means you can cancel a lot of his skills, and Proxima will keep attacking, Ebony will keep attacking, so you can easily combo him, and he actually plays quite well on auto because of that. Coming in at number 7, we have the mighty Thor, Jane Foster, possibly the best or the strongest universal female hero for things like World Boss Legend content. She got an insane upgrade for Thor Love and Thunder. She has all of the lightning. She calls all of it down on her, as well as summoning her lover Thor. And she basically just, well, one-time lover. She basically just cracks. She's cracked. It's difficult to really explain. I think people still kind of underrate her. Survivability is a bit of an issue for her at very, very high stages, being only a tier 3. But she was one of the original tier 3s, right, along with Doctor Strange, who was able to go to stage 40, stage 50 of some of these later World Boss Legends, which was until then thought of as, and probably still thought of by a lot of players, as impossible. Right? Oh, you need tier 4s for that. You need level 80s for that. No. Jane Foster made it work. She climbs all the way up into the 60s for Null World Boss Legend. She really is absolutely cracked. They gave her an insane accumulation, very, very high, buffs with 40% attack here. With a, again, the heal could be better. It's only 15%, but lots of buffs here. Lots of buffs on her passive as well. People forget any ally with the shock ability gets 30% ignore dodge and 40% lightning damage. So she's basically a walking leadership for any lightning allies that have the shock ability. And when you go ahead and filter for shock ability, you'll be surprised. It's actually a pretty decent list of meta characters. You have Thor, you have Storm, you have Jane Foster, you have Blue Dragon. So right away, you already have 3 tier 4 characters who are able to take advantage of Jane Foster's passive, and you have other meta characters for their content like Electro. So you actually have a ton of overlap, not to mention the god of all gods, Tony Odinson, Iron Hammer. That was a joke. But what's not a joke is how good Jane Foster is. Just before we round out the top 5, we have Scarlet Witch coming in at number 6, and she could easily be a top 5 contender for best universal type, so don't take her ranking at 6th as any sort of criticism of her abilities. She's still one of the best universal female heroes in the game, and I know it sounds like a niche, but again, she's competing with Athena, she's competing with Jane Foster, etc. She has one of the coolest kits in the game with all these amazing hexes and these bulbs and all this sort of like dark magic spewing out. She has this huge burst on her second skill, and while we don't see Vision anymore from WandaVision in her skills, which is a bit of a tragedy, we do still get a lot of really cool stuff. We get these little scarlet spikes raining down from the sky, and like Athena, you can combo a lot of her magic and cancel it into each other, so you get this really cool sort of like mega cascading effect. It kind of highlights what's wrong with MFF as far as not being able to see what's going on, but honestly, you can still kind of see Scarlet Witch in her little bubble there while she's going around and casting her skill. So I think they did a good job of balancing the chaos of her magic with still having some visibility. Unfortunately, they didn't change her 6th skill with the giant meatballs, but it packs a much bigger punch now, and you can now cancel it when she slams down into the ground. And it still releases those beautiful butterflies at the end. So it's a pretty cool skill. You can see you can slam it down there, and you can cancel it when she slams down. So, she combines a very easy character to play as far as the gameplay style with absolutely, massive damage, very consistent, very high damage. And she can even be built, believe it or not, for things like GBR to do very, very well for a tier 3. So, yeah, still one of the best tier 3s in the game. One of the more expensive ones, of course, but absolutely deserving of a sort of top 5, top 6 mention. Kicking off the top 5 is Loki. And while you would immediately compare him to Scarlet Witch, in most aspects, he probably is very similar to her. I mean, he's basically the same for ABL, a little bit better for ABX, a little bit worse for World Boss Legend, a little bit worse for GBR. But all of that considered, I think what puts him apart is that he's still the best or one of the best tier 3 farming characters in the game. Now, of course, when it comes to tier 4 farming characters, we know there's Thor, we know there's Magneto, we know there's Black Bolt. There are a lot of options, absolutely. But if you can't go to tier 4, if you can't go all the way that way, or if you can't even unlock level 80s yet, Loki does an absolutely fantastic job of being so good. And it all comes down to one skill, Serpentine Sphere. It's very simple. When there's one enemy around, it explodes with one bomb. When there's lots of enemies around, it explodes with lots of bombs. And I'll do this quick little demo so you can see here. Against these 3 enemies, he's going to create 3 bombs, and there's going to explode 3 times. Pretty straightforward. Boom. 3 explosions. 233 hits. Very cool. But now we go over to this group of 5 enemies, and he's going to create 5 bombs, 1 for each enemy. Now they're going to explode. Now, when you count the number of hits, we're almost at 600 hits. We had a little bit of an overlap here with this little fella, but you're talking about, you know, it increases, right? The number of hits increases because the bombs have this massive overlap, right? Additionally, I think a lot of people forget, but Loki has range, right? Whereas other characters only have 1 uniform, Loki has 2. And while this uniform generally may not be as good, it's much better for World Boss Legend because of the constant healing, and it's easier for newer players to get involved in this uniform and get it to work for them because of the healing and because of the added survivability. So that's what makes Loki, in my opinion, a top 5 universal. Gorr is number 4, and while Jean Grey has dominated the landscape of PvP lately, Gorr is still one of the best. And it comes down to a combination of things. Like Thena, he was buffed, but I think the best way to describe his dominance and how good he is for PvP is the leadership, right? 35% increase HP to all villain allies, plus the requisite debuff lead make him so good, and actually make him one of the best leaderships for Hulk in PvE. So he does have a lot of flexibility there, and while he's not too amazing for PvE, he's not bad either because he can revive, and because he has a lot of cancelable skills. He actually is really easy to play in PvE. It's just that he's so good for PvP, and he was actually basically the best PvP character until Jean Grey came along, that he's just mostly built for PvP these days. But I think what makes Gorr the best and what's part of his oppressive kit is his second skill. They changed his second skill to have super guard break immunity, guard break immunity penetration. So you now need super guard break immunity, which is only given by a few specific buffs from a few specific CTPs to counter this ability. And if you don't have that, you're basically at Gorr's mercy, because even on autoplay, he will spam this ability and keep you stun locked forever. And honestly, this example of how you can just spam this in skill preview is not very different than what you can actually do in PvP. You just have to splash in like one other skill, and you can literally just spam this for the entire fight. And again, if the enemy is not, if the enemy is lacking in super guard break immunity, they will be 100% at your mercy for you to just chip them down. And if you thought that skill was already broken enough, it also has ignore iframe, it also has incapacitation, it also has 80% penetration. It's an absolutely nuts skill. It makes even Adam Warlock's second skill look bad, because it basically is Adam Warlock's second skill without the counter, but with more hits, which is so good and so spammable. Which makes him, very, very strong. Kicking off the top 3 with the tier 4s, we start with Thor. And Thor is basically an upgraded version of Loki, because he is essentially the best farming character in the game at tier 4. He has insanely high damage, in addition to really good AoE. And he combines all of that with movement on a skill that allows you to reposition yourself, but also allows him to cut through enemies on autoplay in a very effective way. On top of that, he's solid for other content, World Boss Legend, GBR, ABX, ABL. He has maybe some survivability issues, but not a huge issue, certainly not as much as mighty Thor Jane Foster. And on top of that, he has a kit that allows him to be his own leader. So very cool stuff there for Thor. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on what makes Thor so good. Obviously, being tier 4 is a big part of it, but the accumulation is nice. He may be a little bit awkward to play with the long cooldowns on 5, but he makes up for that with very high damage, very high burst. Thunderblow got a massive upgrade with this uniform, and his tier 4 skill gives him an insane ramp of elemental damage to the tune of up to 75%. And it also increases other active buff effects, which cascades onto his other buff skills that gives him all attack, all defense, accumulation, etc. But what makes Thor a little bit more interesting than just that, than just being a big stick that hits hard, is that his artifact gives him, or converts, his lightning resistance, which he has a lot of as a lightning god, into lightning damage. And what that allows him to do is be his own leadership. So that's what makes Thor basically the best farmer in the game, because you can combo him with multiple supports. And unlike Magneto, unlike Black Bolt, who are villains, Thor can take advantage of hero supports. He can also take advantage of White Fox's full leadership. So he basically has the perfect combination. And he's one of the easiest characters to buff, because since he also has the shock ability, he can take advantage of, you know, any buffs from Ancient One. He can take advantage of any buffs from Storm, from Jane Foster Mighty Thor. So he really has some of the highest quality supports in the game that can buff him. A runner-up for best universal in the game is Black Bolt, and it's no surprise here if you were able to pick up this Halloween uniform. If you didn't, if you missed what all the fuss is about, Black Bolt basically got the glow up of the decade, because he was so bad before and he's so insane now. One of the only characters to be able to solo GBR without any Pierce. Just an absolute powerhouse who gets so many upgrades, and just like, where do you start, right? He has accumulation, he has a V-pad skill on Cry of Destruction, he has a pretty solid heal with frenzy buffs on his 5th skill. He has that insane Inhumans leadership to the tune of 65% attack, so he has his self buffs. He cleanses himself as well with 12 seconds of remove debuffs that he can do every 20 seconds, so you don't really fall prey to things like tornadoes, the twister, and the time freeze, and the toxic puddles poisoning you. Very, very strong character, 30% chain hit, but it's really the tier 4 that makes this engine go boom, because he gets these insane buffs. He gets up to 7%, no, actually more than 7% pierce, because this is not a full stack striker. He can get up to 8% pierce, 50% attack, but it's that last line there at the bottom, increases final damage by 70%. This makes Black Bolt go absolutely crazy. And this final damage buff was the straw that broke the camel's back. The camel in this case being Hulk, and required the devs to actually nerf Hulk because of it. However, they didn't nerf Black Bolt. Did they not nerf Black Bolt because he didn't need it? Did they not nerf Black Bolt because he was a seasonal uniform and they wanted to sell more copies? Who knows? But what I know is that Black Bolt is absolutely broken for PvE content. Doesn't have any PvP abilities or really presence there, but it doesn't matter when you're this good for everything else. Huge shocker here for number 1, Jean Grey. And I know what you're thinking. She's not originally a universal type. That's true. She's originally a blast type, but we covered this in the blast video where it's their base. It's not their base kit, but it's their most dominant uniforms that are considered. And the 2 most dominant uniforms for Jean Grey are arguably the universal ones. This one, however, turns her into a villain, which definitely complicates things and makes them more spooky. But yeah, what are we thinking? Dark Phoenix here, obviously a villain, and she really lives up to the name because she just terrorizes people. She's an absolute monster. What is there to say about Jean Grey? What effect does Jean Grey not have? Oh, she doesn't have Reflect. Oh, wrong. They gave her Reflect and Accumulation on her tier 4 skill. I don't know why I pressed her tier 3 skill when I said that, but I did. But yeah, they gave her everything and the kitchen sink, right? They gave her a HP and damage based heal. They gave her insane damage, right? They gave her all of these abilities, iframe ignore, time freezing, all this stuff. And then they were like, oh, you know what? That's not enough. That's not enough. So for her tier 4 skill, we're going to give her Reflect and Accumulation. It's an absolute insane buff for an already insane character. She's so strong that you actually don't even need her at tier 4 to already be very good. And what makes it even more insane is you see players capping in PvE content and going to high stages with a completely maxed PvP build. So she's basically the second coming of Hulk with no nerf in sight. They're 100% not going to nerf her because she's such an expensive, iconic character. Sorry, Hulk. But yeah, she's basically just, she has every ability. Literally, there's no ability that she doesn't have, and she makes such good use of it. Everything, iframe ignore, damage decrease, skill damage, bonus damage, all resistances, debuff, revive, everything. Like literally, Gary Oldman yelling everything in that movie is the perfect way to describe Jean Grey. And so yeah, if you haven't built her, if you're still holding on or waiting or hesitating, you should absolutely do it. And that's why I'm wearing red today. Nah, it's just a coincidence. Anyways, that's the top 10 for the best universals in Marvel Future Fight as of February 2023. Will Kang take over? Who knows? Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.